And at this time, we do have wishing to testify Mr. Dan Gilbert, founder and chairman of Quicken Loans. And thank you for joining us this morning, Mr. Gilbert. Look forward to your testimony.
Good morning, everybody. This is Jared Fleischer, who works with us here in Lansing and Detroit, and sometimes he brings his suit and sometimes he doesn't the next morning, but today he did. So I'm Dan Gilbert, and I'd like to just thank the chairman and members of the committee for the opportunity to testify here today. I normally just sort of speak, but my guys and our whole team, we put together a bunch of bullet points, so forgive me for a moment. I'm just going to read a few of them, then I'll hopefully just speak from the heart a little bit and love to answer any questions you have. I'm here today because, I believe that this large-scale transformational legislation is about the future of Michigan. And I think everyone here will agree that, talented young people are the most important economic asset that we have in the state. And I think everyone here knows that as a state, we've been losing our best and brightest for a long time now. In fact, today we rank 46th in the nation, 46th. Of the percent of millennials of our overall population. The millennial generation is the largest one in history. They're our future, and as we all know, they've been leaving Michigan. Let me give you a couple stats, and they sort of blew my mind away because I thought it was bad, but I didn't think it was this bad. Michigan and Michigan State, just those two universities alone, their graduating classes of undergraduates, U of M, 67% of the students leave. The state of Michigan, 62% of Michigan State students leave the state. Overwhelming, huge numbers, and although they've been getting better as of late, those are just huge dollars. And one of the things I wanted to focus on today that people don't talk about as it relates to what we're going to talk about is we have a huge investment in these students. I mean, just a large dollar investment, the subsidy that a student, and I'm just going to use U of M in Michigan, or U of M in Michigan State, as examples, but there's clearly you can look at every state subsidized college or university and see it by university what we subsidize. But when a student graduates from Michigan or Michigan State, it's $11,000 per year that we are subsidizing. Okay, or take that back. There's 17,000 graduates of these two universities, and 11,000 of them are leaving the state. 11,000. Of these students that we subsidize. Their four-year cost to the state of Michigan for the subsidies, I'm talking about in-state students only, by the way, not out-of-state, which we don't subsidize, is close to $3 billion. So for the 4 years they've been in school, about $730-something million a year is being subsidized by the state in tuition dollars that we're losing. And we don't often look at that, but that's a major investment for cities like Chicago, New York, Austin, Texas, even Columbus, Ohio, whoever is going to benefit from our investment. These are human beings, obviously, but they're our future, our best and our brightest. And, that's just I can't stress that enough. And on top of every time they leave that we lose, that investment, what would have they produced if they stayed? So you have to almost take, the expense of what we invested and also what they produce. And when you look at that, you can take conservative numbers just on those students I talked about at U of M and Michigan State and come up with, just on the sales and income tax alone, something like $800 or $900 million a year on those students alone. And again, we're talking about way more than Michigan and Michigan State. And I just wanted to give you some context as to put some dollars around, how important this is, because sometimes people just talk about it in general sort of, terms, gut terms. Oh, all the people are leaving the state, all these students, but it's got true massive meaning to us, and especially entrepreneurs who grow companies today. As we move from a muscle to a brain economy, that it's all about making sure that we capture those usually are coming out of college too, those students who are going to create businesses, technology businesses, and they're overwhelmingly attracted to vibrant, exciting, thriving urban cores. I mean, any survey that you take anywhere, whether it's in Michigan or elsewhere, when you talk to kids in college or even in their 20s into their 30s, where would you like to live today, especially those who are interested in beginning startups, technology businesses, it's overwhelmingly in urban cores, and sometimes they're not in the big cities only, but or even urban cores, smaller cities, Traverse City, Petoskey. You hear this, Grand Rapids, all these cores that are maybe not Detroit, but they still that's where today most of them want to live. Those types who are creating the jobs and the wealth. I think everyone appreciates that for business today, nothing's more important than this talent. It's the fuel and the knowledge that we need. And, it's not just even only about keeping young people here. It's fundamentally about how we compete for jobs and investment and how we can fuel the future growth of Michigan. And the path that we're on to grow the state and the economy, if we continue on the path of not having a strategy, a deep strategy on keeping this talent. I mean, it's one thing to attract additional talent. That's great if we ever get to that level, which a lot of people are actually coming in. And I'll talk about our intern program in a minute. Give you some prospect or some context to that. But just retaining. I mean, people to me say, why don't we go out and get a bunch of kids or people from all these universities? As far as I'm concerned, if we keep what we have, or even a bigger percentage of it, this state is going to be miles and miles ahead of where it's at. And so to give you an example, just some things that we've done over the last few years. So since we relocated from the suburbs to downtown Detroit, and we only relocated our first people in the summer of 2010, so it's 6.5 years ago now, we've invested more than $2.5 billion into the city and state. And we breathed life into 80 new buildings, and we've created, we have 17,000 jobs downtown full time, but a lot of things, or a big point of what we don't have, made public anyway, is that 12,000 of the 17,000 are new jobs. So there's only about 3,500 people who ever worked in the suburbs who are still downtown with us, and one was an acquisition of about 2,000 people. So it's about 12,000 new jobs, and many of them are graduates from not only Michigan State, but Wayne State, Grand Valley, and Western, Eastern. You can go through the universities, and you can talk to these kids, and you can do surveys with them. There's just no chance that a big chunk of them, no chance that we get them in a nice suburb, which is a great place to live and all that, but it just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. They tell us, and we have letters and emails and testimony and all that other stuff. So, it's about the urban cores, and it's about us competing with other energy-filled, growing, optimistic places. Anything, you hear, how do you lose somebody to San Francisco or to New York, Chicago? You hear those all the time, but what you don't hear is sometimes losing them to Austin, Texas, Columbus, Boulder, Ames, Iowa, Madison, Wisconsin, Raleigh, North Carolina, Omaha, Nebraska. And it can happen, and I hear it happening all day long, and that's a shame, especially when we've invested all that money into their state-subsidized education. So we've been aggressive with our investments, very patient capital that we put to work, and we've done it without any kind of elaborate partnerships or anything with the state. But we're here at an inflection point in Detroit, and we continue our progress. And to continue our progress, we have to take it to the next level, because we're out of space really downtown, and we're out of residential capacity downtown. Now, the natural inclination would say, well, that's the market forces at work. The prices should now catch up, which I believe they will, and justify new construction. Except here's the deal. To build a building in New York City or to build a building in Chicago is the same cost to build a building in Detroit. Sometimes people even here can say it'll be a little bit more. And I know John Ricolta, who knows something about building buildings, may be speaking later and talk about this. But so the cost is the same, but the rent, although it's up from where it was, is triple, maybe quadruple in New York, double to triple in Chicago, and pretty much higher than any urban core in America. And so you're it's a strange situation. It's a kind of unusual. We need more space to grow. We need to attract and keep our young people in the state, our talent that we've invested in. But to do new construction, we're willing to put a lot of our own additional capital for sure into it. It's we don't need to make a killing, that's for sure, in this stuff. But even to break even-ish, a couple % return to something in that nature, we're still short unless we have some kind of partnership that it's not a partnership of no return, but a partnership that returns an immense amount of value to the state of Michigan through taxes and through keeping the investment into the education of these kids into the state. And it's not only happening, but it's gaining momentum. Like every year we do surveys, every year we talk to our people, every year we're recruiting on the campuses. It's not about well, is the trend receding? It's about more and more higher percentage of these kids wanting to be in exciting, growing, fast urban cores that have opportunity, technology startups, or even bigger companies that have opportunity. And it's not just on the kids side; it's on the demand side. So, we've talked to and recruited many businesses to downtown Detroit, and not necessarily moving from other places in Michigan, although there's been a little bit of that, but even opening up a second, third location. And the first question you ever get, whether we're talking to somebody out of state, in state, whether it's a retailer, whether it's an office building tenant, is, tell us about the labor pool, tell us about how many Michigan State graduates and others. Sometimes you'll even hear about CCS in Detroit or other universities and colleges. But how many of them are staying? Do we have the labor pool? And I know Representative Price mentioned something about that on her side of the state. It becomes an issue for us, and how do you compete? So it's about competing to keeping our own, competing to bringing those companies in, and having the space and the new excitement in buildings and cranes in the air where hope and optimism reigns. And there's nothing, as far as I'm concerned, that's more hopeful or optimistic. I was in Toronto not too long ago. We have this little company in Cleveland that plays basketball, and they were playing in Toronto, and I was looking out of my window, and a lot of times people said, hey, cold weather cities, they don't grow and prosper like and just go to Toronto and look out your window and see. I counted 17 cranes. This is last spring, and Chicago, not quite as many, but there's cranes there too. We haven't seen one in Detroit, and I know there's been a few in Grand Rapids for sure over the years, but we've seen one, I think, in the last 20 years, and maybe two in the last 35 years. It's just unacceptable. And we've got to have just a bridge to get us to the next phase, where I believe the market forces absolutely will take over. And that's why we're here today. And I think you understand what this transformational bill is all about. To me, it's about creating wealth, creating jobs, creating opportunity, and making sure that the return to the state of Michigan can not only be measured, but even the stuff that can't be measured turns into value as time goes on. So I just want to say a few more things, and I'll close because I could probably talk up here forever. I think that Senator Horn, or Chairman Horn, has been a tremendous leader on this initiative, and you can't miss when you hear his passions. He talks about Saginaw and the opportunity that it'll bring to Saginaw and cities like that. I know that there's projects in Kalamazoo as we went through the state, and Jackson, that have been on the shelves for decades, that'll hopefully get off the ground here. I know there's a big hole in Petoskey that's been there for a long period of time. I've driven by that hole many times, and there's talk about that. This kind of legislation will finally get somebody off the dime there and get I want to say shovel in the dirt, because it looks like they already had a shovel in the dirt, but at least maybe fill the dirt into that hole and build something. So I think this is going to have an echo effect across the entire state, and not just Detroit. So again, I could talk all day long about buildings and about construction and all that stuff, but it's really, to me, we've moved from a muscle to a brain economy. We are competing on both sides of that equation. We're competing for the talent that we're already investing billions of dollars into as a state, and we're competing for the businesses who want to come. And they want to come. There's a lot of great things about Michigan. One of the greatest university systems in the country. The Midwest work ethic's not a joke. It's actually something that's real. I sort of myself thought maybe it was cliche until we started doing business in a lot of other states, and I realized it's true. And obviously there's a lot of great infrastructure here and a lot of other great things, cost of living and everything else. So I just want to thank the chairman of the committee here for hearing me. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. But this is about hope in the future, and I'm hoping this very, very critical time we can deliver. If we deliver, we're going to have in Detroit alone probably $2.5–3 billion of new construction and cranes and hope and optimism in the air in a short period of time.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for your testimony and for all the work you put into this. Representative Shepard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your time coming here today and all the investments that you're doing in Michigan. As a commercial real estate broker in the Toledo market in southeast Michigan, I know firsthand how important it is for states to compete for what you're proposing. My question is, I know you've done a lot in Cleveland, done a lot in Ohio. And I'd like you to kind of reflect a little bit on how Ohio has been and some of the differences there, because I see it just in the Toledo, Lucas County, Wood area that I work on, and I know you're seeing it in Cleveland, and I know you mentioned Columbus, so where my sisters actually moved to after graduating college. So please reflect on that a little bit so we can get an insight into the differences of our Midwest state.
Well, I know Governor Kasich fairly well, and I talk to him probably every couple of weeks, and this is probably, not only probably, it's his number one issue on his mind, is keeping the students that come out of Ohio State and other universities in Ohio. So they have several tools that they use. Our handful of businesses, although they're fairly decent-sized businesses, aren't the kind of, you're probably not going to do this with a basketball team that's already there and some other business. We actually we do have one Quicken Loans location there of about 500 or 600 people. And again, great Midwest work ethic and all that. But there are many companies that are moving into the Cleveland area that I know about that have worked with these tools, and he's very, very competitive. I mean, very competitive. And he wants to win all these businesses. Number one, keep the existing ones there and keep his students there. They're focused on it. Jared, you may know some of the specific tools of Ohio. I couldn't sit here but I know there's 6, 7 of them and they've got it very organized. And when a company or they're trying to keep kids here, although they're not the ones necessarily getting direct, sort of tools. The companies, they sit down. They have a very good process of going through all the opportunities, and they work very closely with them. They're very, very focused on it. Which, I'm slightly torn, but I think I definitely skew to the Michigan side of that equation when we're competing against them.
Representative Brenner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you testify before us. Been down to Detroit, went on a tour of your buildings and facilities down there, and it's truly amazing what's happening in the city of Detroit. And my question was comparison between Michigan and some of the other states and some of the incentives that the other states provide, and how this would compare to some of the things that you do. And I think Representative Shepard kind of asked that question as well. But just a quick comment, in all the people that you run into, there's a phrase that I hate to hear us referred to, and sometimes I think marketing can help us a lot. I hate the phrase Rust Belt, and anyone that you happen to talk to, maybe you could encourage them not to use that phrase to describe the Midwest all the time. It seemed like for a long period of time we didn't hear that phrase until the last presidential election, and now it's used all the time to describe us in the Midwest, and I think we're much past the Rust Belt concept.
I couldn't agree with you more on that one. I'm just as offended as you are, and I remember. I think you're exactly right. It was big and popular, and then it seemed to fade, and I think one or two of those candidates the presidential ones tended to introduce that thing a little bit, but we have there's opportunity. Detroit is one phrase that we've used. We contemplated showing you a video here today, but I said if we do that, and the way I'll talk too much and we'll be over and everybody will be upset, and so we have a lot of marketing going into that, and I couldn't agree with you more about that. And some people who, I'll tell you what, when it comes to Detroit or even Grand Rapids, where I've been to recently and seen in some of the other cities in Michigan, I try not to talk to anybody out of state about them, whether it's media or companies. I say, look, you got to come here, see it for yourself what's happening, because the words I'm going to tell you will never get out. There's decades of hearing all about Rust Belt and everything else, so you've got to be here and you got to see it in person. And like I said, it's kind of a unique time right now because a lot has happened and everything, and now we're at the point, to continue really growing and really impacting the state in the way we want, construction jobs and activity and excitement and keeping the students here, we need to build. I'm using this term vertical. We have to go vertical now, and that's the only way we're going to continue this. And I've heard the same about Grand Rapids and some of the other cities. We've got to almost, let's get going on construction. That's how you grow. The state has to grow, grow its population, grow its cities. That's how you do it. And man, the worst part about it is the best and brightest leaving the state with that investment in it. The best compliments I've ever gotten is from parents who I'll bump into. So just, hey, thank you for maybe creating a job. I go, what do you mean? Well, my son or my daughter is now staying close to home. And when I say close to home, we get people from all over the state. But whether it's Detroit, Grand Rapids, Petoskey, Kalamazoo, they just want to be, and that this generation, for whatever reason, I'm not exactly sure of the dynamics, but they love the buzz and excitement of the urban scene.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and also like to invite you to Bay City to look around in the Great Lakes Bay region.
No, I'd love to do that. Maybe we'll bring Madonna back home and check it out. We took her on.
Do you have her number?
Well, we took her on a tour of Detroit recently, and she got involved in some stuff there. So maybe that's next.
Well, that's where she's from, is Bay City. So a Madonna museum would be great.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So if you could work that out for us, thank you.
I'll get right on that for sure.
All right. Well, I think it's profitable to discuss one issue at a time here. But thank you for your testimony, for your investment into our state. We appreciate it, and thank you, Jared, for all the work you guys have put into this. And thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, everybody. Just let's make this happen. We'll have more exciting stuff going on in the state that we've seen in generations. Appreciate all your time. Thank you.
We do have several people wishing to testify, so I'm going to ask. Provided some latitude to the bill sponsor and Mr. Gilbert speaking to us. So I'm going to ask everyone else, please keep your testimony brief. I have a few cards that I'd like to get through, and obviously